Hello, I am Mandy Pretty, and I'm here with my amazing aunt, Linda Tellington-Jones. And we're back after a bit of a break of doing these very fun video, I don't know, chats. Because you've led such an extraordinary life, Linda. I think it's really important that we record some of these memories because some of my details are certainly fuzzy, even when I've, heard the stories several times, and there's always stories I haven't heard. But what's really exciting is that 2025 is going to mark the 50th anniversary of the Tellington TTouch Method, which is incredible. What a what a life. I mean, this approach has been so ahead of its time for so long. And I mean, luckily, I think people are starting to, there's a lot more people that sort of are aligned with what you've been saying for so long about animals and horses, but it's when you think about what you've been saying for so many years and doing, it's really incredible and so groundbreaking. But I mean, 50 years is a long time. What and so much of the work has developed and kept evolving. What do you see as being sort of the first, what was the beginning? Where do you consider the start of this method?
Well, the start of looking for new ways to teach first horses to learn, actually is in a moment at the in San Francisco at the um, oh, lying on the floor during my second day of my Feldenkrais training at the Humanistic Psychology Institute in San Francisco. And I was lying on the floor doing it with 62 colleagues. It was the first year of the Feldenkrais method in outside of Israel with Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais teaching the whole training. And we're all lying on the floor, and he made a statement that I can remember like it was yesterday. This is July 1975. And it's like my ears pricked up at this statement. What he said approximately is that a human can learn in one experience using non-habitual movements that activate new neural pathways to the brain, therefore giving us more brain cells and enhancing our potential for learning. And although the Feldenkrais method is known for amazing enhancement of movement, his passion, as I thought of that day, was in our capacity for learning. And I thought at that moment, I can remember lying there thinking, wait a minute, if that's true for a human, that a human can learn in one experience, could that be true for a horse? And that very afternoon, I went out and hooked up with a friend. I called a new friend who had just imported a group of from Montana, Arabian broodmares. And I asked him, do you have any of these horses that have a habit that's not, that's annoying to you that you would like to have changed? And he said, well, he had this one 16-year-old mare who'd never been ridden, but every day he had to chase her around and, use food and to catch her up, to bring her into the stable to spend the night and be fed. It just wasn't logical. And so I said, that's a good one. Let's see what happens. Now, the thing is that I had been doing the background to this. I'm going to show you something here behind me.
How long had you been in the Feldenkrais training at this point that you decided to?
One day.
One day.
It was my second day. It's a good question. It was the second day of my training. And
so you just decided, let's see how this works with a horse. So what did you do with her?
So what I did, and the reason I wanted to show you this book, for 15 years, Wentworth Tellington and myself had been following the work on the horses, this type of gypsy massage that my grandfather, Will Kaywood, who was American trainer in Moscow, had brought back to us and had brought to our farm where we had a lot of broodmares, and I was doing 100-mile endurance riding and eventing and steeplechasing. And we found that we could help with this type of physical therapy or massage. We could actually help a horse recover faster after hard work, but it never crossed our mind that you could affect behavior. And
Well, and
so
I mean, now we wouldn't blink about doing body work with our horses, but in the 60s, physical therapy and body work on horses was pretty unheard of, right? I mean, you guys were pioneers.
it really was pioneering. And the thing, this one little booklet with all these details was actually a chapter then in a Doubleday book about endurance and competitive riding that was written about our work. So here I was in this class, and then inspired on the second day of the training to go out, and he caught up this mirror. And so the reason I showed you this book, I just did these movements that we had been doing for years, circling the legs and moving the head and stuff. But the difference, Mandy and you all, that is so exciting to me, and I only realized this like actually within the last year, I was doing the same movements, but with a different intention. I was holding in my mind, wait a minute, how can I actually activate new neural connections that will give this horse more capacity for learning? And what I realized after all these years of doing this, you know what? That's how we think of energy today. It's this concept of quantum science energy, that every intention we have, every thought we have, you all, every feeling, every emotion, every belief we have actually is energy. And we can change the world with this. And for years, we've had this concept, change your mind and you can change your horse. But we had no idea. It would just came out of the quantum field. So you all, I was doing these movements, the usual thing, and not having any idea if it would do anything good, but make any difference. So I worked for maybe 30 minutes doing what I call exploring, just seeing how does this horse accept this? And I always did it in ways that the horse could relax and accept it, and gentle work. And I went home that night, didn't think anything about it. And the next day, this guy, Ted, called me and he said, listen, I don't know what happened to my horse, but I turned her out after you left. And when I went to catch her for feeding time, she actually came to the gate. And I thought, okay, that's definitely a change in one experience, isn't it? And when she went into the stable, into the stall, instead of diving for the hay, he said she kind of stood there because I've been working on her head and face and stuff. And like she wanted me to do something. And I thought, holy mackerel,
Talk about learning.
Talk
in
about
one session. So why were you in the Feldenkrais training to begin with?
Okay, that's another story.
Oh,
and it's important because a lot of people say, okay, so she went in the Feldenkrais training and, did this thing with horses. But the fact is, I'd been working with horses at that point. I was 36 years old, and I'd been working for 30 years with horses until that point, starting off with riding to school for the first 6 years of my life in Canada. Anyway, so why did I join this Feldenkrais training in San Francisco? Because I had been living and working at that point in Germany. And the reason I was in Germany, I had at that point been running, the last thing I'd been doing was running a center in Rolling Hills, California, for to promote the Hungarian horses of Countess Margaret Bessigny. And we'd had horses in our training for years. But at that
was it in Rolling Hills? I thought it was in I thought it was in the Bay Area.
That is the Bay Area.
Or Los Altos. You were in Los Altos, right?
Yeah, it's the same. For my
Rolling Hills is in LA, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot of places in California you live.
Oh God,
I was
that's
just trying to get it. See, this is why I want to get it straight, because it's so, I want the details like there, so I don't ever repeat them incorrectly.
Listen, Mandy, you're listening to this almost 90-year-old memory,
No,
right?
your memory is very honest. I misspeak all the time. I just wanted to make sure I
No,
clarified
thank you.
it.
Rolling Hills, California is where I taught school.
Yeah, no, I know you did. You've done a lot.
Los Altos Hills,
Yeah.
which is just beyond Woodside. It's like
Hmm.
less than an hour from San Francisco.
Mhm.
I have to get a sip of water here.
I mean, you've just done so many things, and it's all these layers of experience that you can't recreate. And it was sort of this like perfect alchemy of all this background of horses with probably the moment, or just happened to be the timing when you were laying down doing this Feldenkrais lesson, that it all just came together, that
Yeah,
it could even assimilate the way it did. And perfect.
exactly. So anyway, in Los Altos Hills, and I had been running this wonderful West Wind Hungarian horse farm for Countess Margaret Bessigny. And the way that happened, just a quick thing, I'd had the school, Pacific Coast Equestrian Research Farm in Badger, California, in the mountains near Visalia. And my husband and I got a divorce. And at that point, I was running the school, and Countess Bessigny, we used to talk every single morning about the horses I had in training. And one day she knew that Wendt had left. And that's a story we should tell. It would be really might give other people some
I
support.
think it's been a couple of years. I think we do actually have I think the last episode we had recorded talks about the blowout.
Yeah, which and what I want to say to that with Wentworth Tillington, if it wasn't for his genius, I wouldn't be here because I learned so much. He was 20 years older than I. Anyway, so here I am. Countess Besson said, Linda, you are working too hard. I want you to find a beautiful property in the San Francisco Woodside area, because I was a member of the Los Altos Hunt Club at that point, and promote my horses from there, where you're close by all the action, not out in the mountains. So we had a beautiful place, and it was I brought the school there. We had a 6-month program there. And I'll tell you, Mandy, and all of you, I'd been working with horses without force, without punishment for many, many years. And what I mean by punishment, seeing the horses purposefully being resistant. And I was really sad to see that there was no change in the human horse relationship, no acceptance, no forgiveness, as we preach today, as our mission is today, no understanding of why horses did things. And I thought, I don't want to go on like this. This is not why I came to this planet. And so I had an interview with the Dean of Adult Education at the University of California in Santa Cruz. And he knew me because I've been running adult education at our West Wind Hungarian horse farm. And I said to him, I think I want to come back. I need to get a PhD in something to do with animal behavior, or I need to have a different title. And he said, listen, and he was Japanese. And I just have so much respect for the intelligence. And he said, Linda, people who go to university don't know what they want. He said, you know what you need to do on this planet. Go out and find it. I mean, that is a shocking statement, actually. And it certainly changed my mind. And so I thought, okay. And that's when I decided I'd had an invitation from Ursula Bruns in Germany to come, because she'd come to our farm and spent like months,
So
weeks with us.
you went to you went to Germany before you did the Feldenkrais training.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. So see, I didn't know this.
Well, see, she had come and spent 6 weeks with us with
Mhm.
Dr. Riesenbugel.
Yeah.
And we showed them all around California. And then she invited me back. And so I went back, and she spent a month showing me all around Europe, showing me different
So
breeds.
is that like 1974?
That was earlier. It was more like 73.
Oh, right. And so was West Wind still there at that point?
Yeah,
Oh yeah. So it was running while you were in Germany.
yes, right. Yeah, no, I had co-teachers, and,
Yeah.
wasn't the only teacher. So, what happened then? Let's see, let me just catch up with, so I was planning to just visit Ursula in Germany. And then my plan was to actually go and spend several months in Africa with one of my ex-students from when I was teaching at Chadwick School, which is a private prep school in Rolling Hills, California, where I taught in 1957 and 1958. So I had been in touch with her. And when I got to Germany and I spent time with Ursula, then the second time I was with her, but headed for Africa, we got a note saying, oh, I know. At that point, it was rainy season in Africa, so we couldn't get in, and they weren't doing the filming then with the gorillas that I wanted to.
Oh,
see.
so you were going to Uganda or Rwanda or somewhere in East Africa?
No, it was actually, I think it was Zambia. Was Zambia or Zaire? I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
One place we actually did go in 1990 with chimps. So
Zambia. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I see. I didn't know that. How many stories have I heard over my lifetime? I've never heard that part.
Yeah. So Ursula said, look, we've got time. You're here. I'd sold all 60 horses at that point. I shut everything down in California, sold all my
So it wasn't running when you were in Germany?
No, not the second time. After I shut everything down. That was the first time.
Okay, so what year did you shut it down?
74.
74. So because I was thinking, because my parents met at the farm, right? At the ranch.
Right.
Yeah, when Phil was coming, my
Yeah.
dad was coming back up from Mexico.
Horse farm. Yes. And my brother-in-law, your father, just drove by our West Wind Hungarian horse farm, stayed overnight with us. And he told his friend after being, and Robin was there. And he told his friend that he was going to marry her.
I know. And if you know my dad, he is not like that at all. Like that is not something that I can even imagine coming out of his mouth. But so I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you were in West Wind.
Me too. Yeah. So anyway, I get to Europe and I can't change my plan at that point. I mean, go to Africa. So Ursula said, look, why don't you just come and prepare some horses and give a presentation at Equitana, which was the second year of Equitana at that point. That was in 1975, Equitana. And she had come to my school and she'd seen us all jumping with no bridles, and at that point, we weren't using the neck rings yet. We were just using a little string, a really breakable string, just tied like it's an Indian style around the horse's chin. And you just have two lines and you have to be super light. So in other words, you're using signals. And as I recognize it today, you all, our intention, our energy, simply our thought, that, feel this, it's just the light. It's phenomenal when you just think of this energy, your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings. So anyway, we prepared these horses, and then Ursula Bruns, who was the publisher of a magazine called Fright Side and Saddle, Free Time in the Saddle. She was the first one to write about pleasure, and she was an amazing horsewoman and person. And she then watched me at Equitana, and we had Roger Russell and two of her young people at her place, which was called a Rake and Test Center, and Johann Schumacher and Andy. They were 15, and we took 4 horses and we trained them to jump, in quadrille against each other, between each other, without any bridles, and it made a huge splash. And I started then being asked to give weekend workshops with riders in Germany. So
this is still before July 1975. This would have been in the spring before you'd done the training. Yeah.
Yes. And so Ursula Bruns had seen the effects of what this, of how I was with horses. This before, felt a long time before.
Yeah.
And she said that she would like to start a school with this new style of riding. It was the balance seat style that we taught at our instructor school for 10 years, students from around the world. And so she wanted me to run it. And I said, look, I'm finding my way around the world. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I will give 1 year to this. And Roger Russell, who was my then partner and who is my now lifelong friend, Roger wanted to be able to contribute something to this school. And so he and I had actually done a 1 hour awareness through movement class at Esalen Institute the year before, when I was still, of course,
Is that in Big Sur?
yes, in Big Sur, California. And it changed my life, you all, like 1 hour. And when you're a rider, the type of rider we were before, centered riding and connected riding, you're in a certain position. And the way trainers got the shoulders back, I never did this, but this is what my husband, who was a cavalry officer, did to us. He put a riding crop behind your elbows. And of course, what it does is just arch your back more, for God's sake. But that was the idea. Well, that means I was a stiff person, and I had never been able to dance or move my pelvis. That was, rigid. And so in one Feldenkrais session, one awareness through movement led by Alana Rubenfeld, who was actually reading this lesson that she had copied from Moshe, which was totally illegal. She had taped it and copied it. It changed my life. I did this one movement for 1 hour, and I got up, and they had dancing at Esalen after this in the evening, and I danced my ass off. That's all. I mean, seriously, I could move my pelvis in ways I had never, ever thought to move before. So Roger, when I was asked to run it 1 year, promised to run this school in Germany, this new school based on the Feldenkrais, based on the Tellington method as we knew it then. And we've been writing.
And so would you say it was already the Tellington method?
Well, we didn't call it that. It was
Yeah.
at the school of Pacific Coast Equestrian
Yeah.
Research Farm, because we've been writing articles for years, syndicated column in Western Horseman, and we had 8 magazines who were carrying our.
At that point, was it mostly focused on riding?
It was all focused on riding.
Yeah. So it was like, from the
Mandy, that's
balance,
really
the
important.
balance position.
Yeah, the reason it's important, you'll see how I morphed into the groundwork because of one horse.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so Roger, because it would make such a difference to riders, which is what we were teaching in the school. Plus, all the other stuff we taught at the school was all the aspects of horsemanship: feeding, breed, ailments, illnesses, all of that stuff, equipment, but nothing on the ground.
Yeah.
And except lunging. That was it.
Yeah, just sort of your classical.
And round pen, classical lunging. So he decided that he would go to Israel and learn the Feldenkrais work. And Roger wrote to Israel and was told that unless he spoke Hebrew, he could not study with Moshe. But they were starting and then it was a 3 summer of 12 weeks training in San Francisco at the Humanistic Psychology Institute. And he wanted to know if he could sign up for it. And so he wrote away for the brochure. And when we got the brochure, I looked at this and I said, I'm supposed to do this. Wow. Because this could make such a difference to my riders. I mean, when you feel the difference of how you can move your body, it's a game changer. That's changed my life. And so he wrote away, and I said, I have to get into that. But I thought it would be like for medical people, the way it was written. And so I called my husband, Wentworth Tellington, and I mean, he was so amazing. And so
were you still married at this point?
No, we'd have been divorced for.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just making sure.
But I always stayed in touch with him.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an amicable lifetime of connection after that. So so he wrote and asked if I could enter this class, and of course anybody could enter, actually, is what we found out. And so when I got accepted, and Roger wasn't sure if he would be accepted, as I remember it, I was thinking, okay, I can go, and then I can tell Roger they'll come with me if he doesn't get in. But of course, he did get in.
Mhm.
And it's thanks to Roger that we did this, like during the whole year between this summer thing, we would be doing the awareness through movements and practicing. So
So
anyway,
where does this fit with the year of teaching for Ursula? Had it started yet?
no, it never did start. The
I see,
thing
because
is,
you decided to do the training in the summer in San Francisco?
so what happened? Let's see. So I went to the training,
Mhm.
and then it was that second day of that first
Right.
year when I got this thing. Could there be a way that horse animals could
Yeah.
learn a new way without force? That's the point, because it was all based on submission.
Sure.
The horse, like it was thought that they were purposefully being dominant. Those are the common words.
Oh,
It's
yeah, you still hear it, they're just I
it's
was I get,
totally
you get
common.
suggested these Facebook groups with these trainers sending, and it is still the language about, well, someone was asking, is that horse just stubborn or they just don't want to do it? And I thought, it's like so unfortunate that we're still hearing all this language because it was easy for them. They do it, it's
Well, and I
and they
have to
understood.
I have to point this out, and I find it still so sad. And I want to say at this point, when I pointed out, the biggest thing that changes my life and makes me, I think, be a peaceful, happy person at my age, is the concept of forgiveness. The
Oh,
people
sure.
who are saying that and doing that, they don't know any better. And if I just put blame on them, or say they're wrong, it doesn't help. It
Mhm.
creates resistance. I'm putting more energy there. So what I simply do is hold the quantum science concept of infinite possibility, that that person will come to a realization that
Well, and
perhaps
it's the
they're
thought
right.
of forgiving the horse too, if something you feel is offensive, or like resistance. It's that I think that even if I was wrong and the horse was actually stubborn, giving the grace to anyone, that's having a hard time, human or animal, it always makes the situation easier. If you kind of look at it from a place of forgiveness rather than there being like a blame or an anger towards it or a resentment about the behavior rather than it just being what it is and just moving forward.
And this is really important to bring up at this point. Many people who hear us say that say, well, they allow horses to do whatever they want.
Mm.
The point is, what we do is teach a horse what we want
Mhm.
instead of punishing them for behavior we don't want. I mean, that is a totally different concept. And if I hadn't been in that class on that day and thought, wait a minute, how can I influence the potential for learning through these movements, we wouldn't have this method today like it is today.
Because at
It's so
that point, you had sort of gotten out of the competitive world with horses.
well, before we shut down at West Wind, we were still doing 100-mile endurance
Yeah.
riding, of course, with the Hungarians.
Mhm.
And we actually competed. Margaret Bessonier was there, Countess Bessonier, and at the Virginia 100-mile in 3-day ride, we won lightweight, middleweight, and heavyweight
Mhm. There,
championships with the Hungarian horses.
there was an understanding I have from Robin, certainly, that there was a point where you both sort of were ready to like sort of not be as involved in the horse world anymore, just because of what people were like the treatment horses were having, be given to win a ribbon. There was sort of that by any means necessary attitude in some of the horse world.
Totally. And that is when I decided I have to get out and I have to come from a different point of view. I'm not
Mm.
here on the planet to do this.
Yeah.
Must be some other reason. And that's when I went to the Dean of Adult
Right. I
Education.
see. That was the point that you
That
were
was the
kind of ready
point.
to change
Yeah,
path.
and then I told Margaret Bessy, and she was so incredibly understanding. I mean, I had a 10-year contract,
Yeah.
was so wonderful, and I
She
had
sounds
such an
like she was an incredible woman.
amazing
Yeah.
human being. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Hmm.
So anyway, so then what happened after that second day of the training in July,
With Ted's horse.
a few high points happened. First of all, I still had students in that area because it was
Mm.
exactly the area where we had West Wind
Mhm.
Hungarian Horse Farm. And we put on horse shows there, and I knew a lot of people for years. And of course, I was a member of the Los Altos Hunt Club. And So I knew lots of people. So I was asked by a student to go and look at a horse that she wanted to buy, a pleasure horse. And I was still actually taking private riding students, been working with. And so I went to look at this horse. It was a 12-year-old thoroughbred gelding. And the owner got on and rode the horse a couple of times around the arena at the trot, and his ears were pinned back. And so I said, thank you very much, but actually this is not what we're looking for. And, you know, his attitude is really questionable. And she said, oh, but he didn't normally do that. And I said, oh, really? Because, you know, you can't believe what people say, sorry. And so she got off, pulled the saddle, and I just started checking him because we've been checking horses' bodies for years. And when I just touched his neck, it was hot. And when I just did this little pressure, he just like threw his head up and you know, really startled. And I said, oh, so what could that be from? I mean, it was hot.
Wow.
And she said, well, 3 days before, she'd been out on a trail ride with a group, and he was jiggy the whole time. And she turned his head in one direction the whole time. And of course, he had a pain in the neck. And that is when it hit me, Mandy, and you all listening, that behavior, this undesirable behavior is so, or resistance in horses, is so often caused by pain. It can be pain from too much work, and the horse has a lot of, you know, stiffness in the body. And, or it can be like this, where they've been ridden in a certain way, or holy moly, when we understand this nuchal ligament now and the function it has, it can be from just exhaustion of the muscles from being overbent. And nobody was talking about that at that point.
Well, and now we're seeing all these people doing incredible things with the dissections, how many sort of bony malformations there are that they can't tell us any other way but through their behavior if something is difficult, painful, or uncomfortable, or, you know.
And what happens when they do that? They just get beaten up. So I don't want to go there, because I want us to hold, wait a minute, what we have developed there over these years from all the work we've done together. And my sister, Robin Hood, has been so instrumental in this, because as we developed the work from that first summer, she would say, okay, Linda, we've got to logically look at this. And it's been incredible. And of course, she started that newsletter in 1983.
Yeah.
Which ran until 10 years ago, all those years.
So that was like in 1975, you identified that, you know, pain was a huge cause of behavior in horses. Again, you know, this is a more commonly accepted now, but I mean, so far ahead of your time in the 70s that people would even consider that.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And I never could have done that if I hadn't put my hands on a lot of endurance horses at that point, you know.
Yeah.
So what happened after that, this concept of non-habitual movements of the body, and I always add in the word gentle, because, oh my God, when Moshe wouldn't have used those words because he would assume it would be that way. But when I went to observe some sessions with other people that summer, because we were 12 weeks in San Francisco from Germany. And I remember I was waiting for someone in a physical therapy office, and I watched this Chinese guy down on his hands and knees and just sweating and just holding his breath because he was being forced into this extreme place of pain from a physical therapist. And thank God now physical therapy has come so far, because many physical therapists have integrated so many other modalities now into that work.
I mean, Moshe was so ahead of his time too, really. You know, the concept of, you know, finding the ease in movement and showing the nervous system. I think it's like the possibilities versus its limits. Is that sort of one?
Totally.
He had, I mean, which is
amazing.
You know,
It's just incredible work.
So you were still working with horses while you were going through this training with Moshe?
Well, yeah. So what I would do once I got this idea, okay, we had classes from 10 till 4,
Mhm.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I had 3 days on the weekend, and then I would go out and I was working with horses, doing clinics and looking for individual interesting issues
Yeah.
where I could explore these non-habitual movements. And the next one that I remember, it's so interesting. I was again looking for problem horses,
Mhm.
and I knew one of the polo horse trainers was a really nice guy, and he had another maybe 14-year-old gelding that he played polo on, and he had a school, and he wanted to have this horse as one of the student horses for jumping, low jumps training, but he couldn't use him because the horse would not step over a pole.
Hmm.
They even drew a line in the sand in the arena, it wouldn't step over it.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
What can I do with this horse that's non-habitual that could change him? And I remember it like it was yesterday. We're standing out in this arena. There are a lot of different poles lying around. It was and Roger Russell was at the head of this horse and just with the lead, and the horse's head was up and with a ewe neck just standing there.
Mhm.
And this is what I am just so blown away over the years, Mandy. I've worked with so many really experienced horsewomen and men, and they don't realize the importance of this. If you can't change that ewe neck, you cannot change behavior. We just didn't get it before. And so I'm just exploring, working, doing the leg circles, doing different things. Who knows what I was doing on the body? Because see, we weren't doing any body work as part of the Feldenkrais work because we didn't do that for 2 years. We had first 2 years of just learning for ourselves, getting into our awareness through this movement. And so I'm working with the tail at that point. And I remember years before talking to a blacksmith who had a horse who kicked like a lot. And I had found if I take the tail to the out of the tail groove to the side, the horse doesn't kick. I wasn't thinking at that point yet, wait a minute, why is the horse kicking? Because they're afraid they don't have a connection to the hindquarters. What I know today, the communication between the cells is inhibited from tension, from fear. And so I was just doing something with the tail, just these little gentle movements with the tail. And suddenly the horse, his head was up, dropped his head. And I said, when the head's down, Roger, just step over that pole. And the horse walked over the pole. And I'm standing there like with my mouth wide open because honest to God, nobody talked in those days about the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And when you bring the horse's head down, it takes him out of the sympathetic, which is fight, flight, fear, faint, or fool around, and gets them in the parasympathetic where they can actually think and learn.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I think of how the ignorance, and I still see today that absolute people still, it's not common understanding of the difference between the posture and the sympathetic and parasympathetic. And it's so important for
It
all.
comes down to letting them feel safe, when they're more balanced, that and you're in that state, you do feel safer because they can actually move and organize themselves too, right? It's not that braced.
And yes, and it's actually measurable hormone activation.
Yeah.
That's the thing we don't get. When we think horses are being resistant to pain, being resistant, people just don't think maybe the horse is really tight in the back and real painful, or
Yeah. So
So
that was still in 1975, and you're putting all these pieces together.
this is
Like that's
still
that
this
true,
is
like real, like definition of genius, though. Taking all these external thoughts and concepts and being able to put it together in such a powerful way.
well, and based on all those years of
Well,
experience
that's
with
it, but it's all the pieces that had to
yeah,
come together,
it's all pieces, yeah. So I was thinking, and then the way the Labyrinth came in, it was
Mm,
that summer,
mm,
actually. And I was reading a book and I wish I could remember the name of it. It was
mm,
by a British author, and it was a book on horse psychology.
mm,
And she made a statement in that book that when you bend a horse in a certain way, that they can learn differently.
mm.
And I wish I've got to ask
I have to
Roger.
look it up.
Well,
Search it.
I've got, yeah, maybe we should. Anyway, it was just that moment of just the bend. Now
Mhm.
think about the bend. How many of you have seen these pictures of the old, the cowboys from the 50s would have start a horse in a small round pen with
Mhm.
high walls so they couldn't jump out. And before they'd mount, they'd simply turn the horse's head back to the saddle. When the horse's head is turned back like that and they mount, the horse in that moment cannot startle, cannot buck. It's a total, that is a non-habitual movement. And yet,
Yeah.
if you get on a horse and they're standing there with braced or with the holding their breath, and listen, I've seen so many. I remember a book.
Do you
Oh my
do you
God.
think that having the horse's head bent at such an extreme, because you still see that today, people bend the horse's head all the way around to the toe to get on because they can't move easily,
Yeah,
but they
and
can't
it's
explode. Do you think that's the same as just like do you think they're really in a state of learning when they're doing that?
no, they're
Okay,
in a
so
state
that's an
of freeze.
extreme, but like either extreme, right? Of being overbent or like stock still and straight. You're not
Yeah,
saying like that when their nose is bent to the stirrup, they're learning.
no, it's not about learning. It's in freeze. It's
Totally,
preventing
because they can't move.
reaction.
Yeah, that's why
No,
people use
But
one
it,
rein stocks and things, just to inhibit the
but it
forward
was
movement.
it was smart. Instead of getting on a horse with the head up holding the breath, which I recently heard of somebody who had their actually bred a horse foal and did all the Tellington work with him until he was 3. And then because she was pregnant, sent the horse off to a trainer.
Mhm,
And when the trainer got on, the horse was unafraid. So he
mhm,
set spurs and kicked him, and the horse bucked. And then she was told this horse is really dangerous.
mm.
So it's just interesting, I think, but still, and in the Western world in those days, and I remember the 1950s very well, what was written in the magazines and the books. In order to get a horse's head down, some of the top trainers would touch them on the top of the head with a bat. It
Mm.
was it was a short crop with a bat on the end of everything and tap them down because as long as they're down. And I remember in one of the horse magazines seeing a picture where the horse's head from the curb bit was tied back um, to the tail. And when you put them down like that, they can't react,
Mhm.
but go into submission. They're not present. And that's the thing that is really hard for me to see when you get these horses who've been, what's called a
Shut
peanut roll.
down. Yeah.
But that was to keep the horse down there and submissive. That was the whole
Yeah.
thing.
No, totally. I bet you see that in lots of disciplines now too, don't you?
Yep. So
So
anyway,
the labyrinth came from this, you're sort of inspired by this idea of the bending.
by one sentence in this book on the horse psychology,
Mm.
and because we were working in these arenas, like with that horse who couldn't step over the pole, I thought, I wish I could remember. And I've got to call into Roger. I'm going to ask him if he remembers where we were. Maybe I'll remember the exact reason I did it. But we found that when we put the horse around these poles, bending them around the poles, that how I understand it today completely, it simply gives them boundaries. And it's those boundaries that makes them feel safe. And that's
Mm.
how we came to leading the horse in what we call the homing pigeon, where you have a lead from both sides. And
Mhm.
I'm telling you, I've only seen this in one other place in the world. And that's when I was asked to go to Japan. I spent 10 days with trainers and grooms in Japan with these top resources in the world. And they are walked out among the big primary racetrack has a huge sand walkway. And many of these horses are walked out with a person on each side with the halter, just lead on the halter. Because when you give them boundaries, there's no reason to startle.
Yeah. It
And
probably also keeps the handlers feeling safer so the handlers aren't as reactive. You know, you
well,
sometimes see at the racetrack, there's quite a, you know, when they have two of them, they could stay, let the horse be in their, like give them balance and stay in their own balance.
but also it's, I think it has to do with energy
Mm,
because in doing this for ages and many of those 2-year-olds, you see sorry, I have to clear my
okay.
throat. You see them, the, the handlers, not even the jockeys, the handlers sitting on the horse bareback with a halter,
Mhm.
riding around this beautiful big track under the trees and shade. And it's very peaceful. And I think the energy that's created of peace makes a big difference. They,
Mhm.
it's not that you see horses fooling around at all. When they know, when they track, they know that this is our time to walk around this huge, shady, beautiful track. So that's the only time I've seen it.
Mm,
And um, all of these discoveries that we had of boundaries, it was years before I realized, what are we doing with the labyrinth? Creating boundaries. And
mhm.
where I began to really realize it is when we have children who will learn this stuff for themselves and put themselves in the labyrinth and go through it, pretending they're a horse or a dog when they feel overwhelmed. Isn't
Yeah,
that interesting?
it is
Or
interesting.
we've had people in wheelchairs when they feel fuzzy in the morning. That's what I should be doing in the labyrinth.
Yeah, give yourself a little rope labyrinth.
Just,
I think there's got to, I mean, there's also something too, just the change, the gentle change of bend in a very like slow, mindful way that must have, you know, with the boundaries. I think, because I think certainly for horses and dogs, you see it helps affect their balance in a way. And I think so much of it does come back to when the handler and the animal feel safer, it does change the energy, do you know, because everyone is in a more like at less of a reactive state when you feel safe.
absolutely. And I remember, I think it was the second summer when I was asked to look at a stallion that they had just gelded. I couldn't believe it because they said he was so dangerous and they couldn't even ear him to treat him. And when I finally did the work on him and got him to relax his head, still not realizing that it was putting him in the parasympathetic um, state of rest and recovery and learn. And I got to the ears, they were completely encrusted. It was just awful. And I'm sure this is why the horse was so resistant and gave him so much trouble. It's so interesting, all the discoveries that we made.
There is. So did you stay in the training? Because this is like you were saying the next summer, is that 1976?
Yeah, 76, 75, 6, 7, and 8. The fourth year, after the third year, Moshe said, we're not ready to be professional Feldenkrais teachers, practitioners, as we were called. And so he set us up for another 6 weeks. And
Mm,
in those 6 weeks, we all had supervision and would be working on people and getting feedback.
mm,
And the thing is, I was really blessed because I wasn't working. Most people who went through those that summer through the class had to work to pay for it and make a living. I didn't have to do that, and so I could watch Moshe, and I had so many days. He would work after our 4 o'clock class. People would fly in from all over the world to be worked on.
wow.
And
How did you not have to work?
what
Why didn't you have to, like, how'd you make money?
I had enough money from being teaching in Germany and from what I had from
Oh, I
before.
see. Yeah. So you had work. You just didn't have to work a regular job in between.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other thing is I could afford the $100 for 20 minutes with Moshe. And I still don't understand why he took me because he wouldn't take most people in our classes. He took people with really hard. And I don't know why I don't know why he took me, but he was really intrigued with the fact that I was working with animals.
Right.
Yeah, it was
So
really
what
neat.
year is it that you did a demonstration for him with what you'd sort of like incorporate from what you already knew and your horse experience with the
We should put
pieces?
this up here. So after we graduated, the next training that Moshe did was organized at Amherst
Hmm.
Amherst College in Massachusetts. And some of us were invited to come back and do a functional integration because there were 200 and I think it was like 53 people in that class.
Wow.
And, you know, he had people coming from all over the world, so he wouldn't take, you couldn't get there weren't enough of our teachers, Mia Siegel and Gabi, I forget her last name, and Johanan. We had several other teachers, but they couldn't get lessons. So the only lessons that where they could actually feel functional integration was if one of us were invited back to work people.
And what year was that?
I think Eleanor and Silverstein and I are trying to remember the year. We think it was 81.
Oh, right. Wow. So in the meantime, though, you'd been teaching in Germany.
What?
In the meantime, you'd been teaching in Germany.
Yes.
So, I mean, really, you had really experimented for years, you know, taking what you, not experimenting, but developing what you'd been doing.
Exploring, what I call it, experimenting, exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the thing is, when I came back from that first summer, this is where I've got to call into Roger because I can't remember the exact times. We came back and
to Germany. Is that what you mean? You came back
no,
to Germany?
let me just think about this.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, we were living in Germany.
Yeah.
We had residence in Germany at the time and a car and, you know, doing workshops. So anyway, after that after my first performance with 4 of us jumping with no
right. At Equiton. This is at Equiton.
1975.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it was written in a lot of magazines.
Yeah.
And many people asked me for workshops. So the first workshop that I decided to put out an advertisement that I would take adult riders who either through an accident had become fearful or they had horses who were fearful. And I had been working with the issue of fear at our school for years and years. That was something we really worked to get horses so they were never fearful of what we were asking them to do. So I was told I took 20 riders and with horses, 20 horses in this weekend. Now you all have to understand, I had people who came to me for like 9 months. And I had horses from Countess Bessigny who came for a minimum of 2 years. I was not used to taking riders and having to make a change in them in a weekend or in the horses for a weekend. And this is this is the year before I did the Feldenkrais training. So I was told, oh, Linda, you don't need a translator because every German speaks English, enough English to get by.
In 1975, especially, it's like, that's a bit, you couldn't assume that now, even though it's more common now.
You can't assume that. So anyway, I got there and nobody spoke one word and I had no translator. So, but you see, so I wrote down 10 German words that were important. And the reason that I was able, and so I taught the whole class with those 10 words. And it really worked. It was just incredible. And the reason that I could even do that is because in Canadian school, I had Latin and French. Now, the French Canadian that I learned didn't work in France very well, and I didn't remember much anyway, but I had enough understanding to be able to conjugate. And so I spent a wonderful weekend, and we had huge changes in these horses. And what I realize now, Mandy and you all, is that it was the energy, actually. The fact that I knew that I could find a way to make those riders and horses feel safe. So one of the primary requests is if a person felt nervous or afraid of something I asked them to do, stop, don't do it. Manage yourself, trust yourself, let your body know and let your horse know if they're afraid. We don't whip them to get them over something. We step back and figure a way that we can help that horse to do what we're asking. Now,
So that in itself is so ahead of your time too, because you were helping people learn self-regulation of their own nervous systems before they then,
right,
took it out on the horses feeling scared or silly, or you know what I mean? Like so often we end up feeling like we have to push the
yeah.
horse through so we don't feel silly.
Well, not silly, like you're letting them get away with something.
Well, that's what I mean, but you feel belittled or you're not good enough or something, there's sort of
Belittled,
that.
that's a good one. Yep. And that is something that brings up another thing, memory that I have in those early days at this rake and test center. A very experienced jumper rider brought a 17 two-hand horse to Raken, and where Ursula Bruns sat. She was the founder and director, and wanted to know what I could do because this horse was inconsistent. And when you'd ask him to go into arena, what they would do, he would rear and refuse and spin back, and then he'd get punished. And of course, the next time you have the same thing. And this is a big horse, right?
Yeah.
So I get on him and I ride him around a little bit. And remember, this is a whole other story. I had been catch riding since I was a teenager, horses I didn't know in really big horse shows. And so I get on this horse and I'm not getting on with as I see it today, the intention or the energy of showing who's boss. I'm getting on to say, what can we do together that will help you overcome this fear of going forward? That's where I was coming from. So I get into the arena and we go it halfway down and he spins back. And I just stopped him and I got off and I led him around. And I mean, I'm thinking of another situation where I did this. It's so interesting because this is completely intuitive. It's not what I ever would have taught anybody or would have done, but it's the only safe, logical thing to do. And as I analyze it today, why didn't the horse go down there? He was afraid of what's going to happen in this arena. They're put under pressure. They're held in front. And in Germany, in those days, and we're still discussing this actually, it's still taught that you want 30 pounds in the hand. Can you imagine what that's doing to the bars? And that you're really tense, you really drive them with your legs.
Driving them
Either
forward with the
driving,
e-brake on.
yeah, with the e-brake, you're either driving with a really tight leg. And I just had an email from Eliana Lorenz about this morning. We were talking. When you close your leg and it's really tight, think what
We're
it
at
does to
spurs.
stopping your body. You're in freeze. And when you're holding like this, I've worked on some of these riders, they have such frozen shoulders. Aside from what is it doing to the horse, when you clamp the horse, think of how that is affecting the entire fascia and matrix through the whole body. And then we're surprised that they don't go forward, right? Because they can't.
Well, and talk about not being able to really breathe, either really being able to
Can't
breathe
breathe.
when you're in such a clamped state, and then what that does to all our hormones and nervous system. It's
And that's
interesting.
really important.
So I think we are probably at a point that we'll wrap up, because what I'd like to talk about next time is you did that 6-week training, right? That was then sort of, you did a 6-week long, like that Christine was at in Germany in 1976.
Okay,
And I
yeah.
think that might be a fun thing to chat about, because I mean, at this point, you had really been going full blown ahead. And what I keep hearing from you that I think is so incredible is your ability to have this nonverbal communication. It's same with that group, why you could teach a weekend hardly having like any common language. And it's when you see you with an animal, even today, you make a connection with them before you start doing anything with them. And you probably intuitively learned a lot of that from catch riding, and why you were so good at catch riding. You made that little connection and found that sort of common ground. I mean, but you do it with people too. And I think that's pretty incredible and a huge piece of why what you've done for the past 50 years has been so groundbreaking. That
So
ability.
let me with two thoughts. One is that ability to catch ride and be so successful was partially or perhaps very much influenced by my mother, who would sit on the side of arena. And you'd sometimes at the Edmonton Spring Horse Shows, which were 9 days long, you sometimes had 40 horses in the arena. And I'm sitting on a horse that I maybe had 10 minutes on to get to know. And I would go in with the idea, what can we do in here together? And as I went around, my mother would sit on the edge of the arena and say, "Smile, dear."
I can hear grandma saying that.
Yeah, and you cannot believe what did that mean when and I did. I listened to her. When I smile, it activates my serotonin, my feel-good hormones. And thanks to the Italian studies of mirror neurons, the horse feels that, and that affects their ability to feel good. It's so exciting, you all.
Pretty
So
amazing. Well,
until then,
thank you, Linda. I mean, I learned things. You think I'd heard all the stories, but I definitely haven't. So I'm glad we're doing this. And I look forward, we'll have to we'll keep going next time because I know you have we're just 2 years into this now, almost two, not even 2 years. We basically just touched the surface. So it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
it's so much fun to share with you and with you all.
Thanks.